organized in cooperation with UNESCO and with Scholars at Risk. I would also use this opportunity to thank permanent missions of Portugal, France, Luxembourg, Ireland, Finland, Republic of Korea, and European Union for co-sponsoring this event. Without you, this event would not take place. So, as we convene today, I would just like to acknowledge the critical role that academic freedom plays in addressing the pressing issues of our time, from climate change and global health to social justice and technological advancement. Our discussions and collaborations must reinforce the commitment to protect and promote these freedoms universally. I would imagine that many of you were yesterday during the interactive dialogue where over, I think, 80 member states actively participated in the dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on the right to education. So in this spirit, I would like to encourage all the participants in discussing, in sharing their views and opinions with us. And with this, I would just like to give the floor for the opening remarks by the Deputy Permanent Representative of Portugal, Mr. Mário Martins, but only a bit of housekeeping here. What I would like to mention is that you would have on your left-hand side the principles that have been printed in all languages, so please help yourself, take them. We are not distributing USB keys. We have just the opportunity to have them printed. And I will really try to keep track of time. So I may start waving in a weird way, which would mean that you're running out of time. So with this, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Martins, please.
Thank you. So I'll try to be disciplined, even because I don't have a speech, because I will hand it to the experts of the first thing I would like to share with you was to highlight is the importance of these side events that we organize on the sides of the HRC. It's always more comfortable to be in room 22 rather than be in room 20. Here we can have a more diplomatic freedom to share thoughts that are not really based on instructions that we receive from capitals. So let's try to take advantage of this with the respecting the different opinions. And of course, a special word to commend the Special Rapporteur and on your recent report. And I would like to kick off this debate to share with you a couple of ideas on the status of the academic freedom in my country, in Portugal. Our constitution recognizes and guarantees academic freedom. So 2 articles of the constitution, 42 and 43, recognize the freedom of intellectual, artistic, and scientific creation, as well as the freedom to learn and to teach. And I think this is one of the fundamentals of our academical life in Portugal, especially since the revolution of 1974, that we know that this year we celebrated the 50th anniversary. And the other element which I think it's important for this debate is, and for you to have an idea of the portrait of how does it work in Portugal, it's that the Portuguese legal framework supports autonomy of higher education institutions. So universities in Portugal, they are self-governed, and they decide on their research agendas, teaching methods, and how they want to disseminate the findings on their researches. Well, this is not my invention. It's confirmed by international institutions and also by the global academic indexes of reference. Not everything is perfect. We are still far from being perfect. And I would identify one challenge and one obstacle. The obstacle is it's always about the money, budgetary constraints. So budgetary constraints indeed can affect and have a direct impact in academic freedom because the academies need to make choices and they can be biased by the fact that they have or not have been provided funding. And the challenge that I would identify, and please do not interpret me wrong, okay? It's everybody knows the importance of academic international collaboration and the dynamics of cooperation between academies from different countries. But we know that this is also a challenge if we cooperate with academies where the academic freedom, where the environment of academic freedom is different. So this will create also challenges for the academics. That's why I think, and we are developing that in my country, it's so important that we develop this concept of academic diplomacy and scientific diplomacy. So diplomacy, we have a set of tools where we can also help the academics to merge this and to respond to these challenges. So just to conclude, Portugal, academic freedom in Portugal is a reality. It really fosters, and we believe in that, academic and scientific progress. And of course, if there is academic and scientific progress, there is social and economic development. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing the situation in your own country, but also for sharing the challenges that possibly all other countries are having as well in this field. Now we can really continue, and I would like to give the floor to Monsieur Hugo Henry, le conseiller politique et le coordinateur de la mission de la France. Monsieur, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Madame Special Rapporteur. Dear members of the panel, thank you very much. I cannot but agree with my colleague on the right about the importance of this event and this initiative. Why? Because the situation overall is quite worrying, I would say. As your report, Madame Special Rapporteur, points out, attacks on academic freedom are on the increase through the world. This includes, of course, repression, intimidation of researchers and teachers, restrictive legal and financial frameworks, among others. And some figures show a clear decline in academic freedom, and I have one striking, I have to admit, of 21% of countries which represent half of the population of the world who have experienced a decline recently. Academic freedom is intrinsically linked to the effective enjoyment of other rights and freedoms, such as participation in public affairs, freedom of opinion and expression, and the right to education, demonstrating the indivisibility of all human rights. And this freedom is one of the conditions of democracy because it's a safeguard against the manipulation of information or the distortion of history. It's also a prerequisite for development, for technical and scientific progress, for cultural and creative industries, because without this freedom, the achievement of sustainable development goals is clearly compromised. All of this was reiterated by the High Commissioner recently during his vision statement for the Summit of the Future. Last year, France, along with South Africa and over 70 other countries, we have launched a call for enhanced international cooperation in order to strengthen the protection and promotion of academic freedom in the spirit of Vienna Declaration and Programme of Action. At national level as well, France is also translating conviction into action. Since 2017, the PAUSE program has been supporting scientists and artists in exile by facilitating their hosting in higher education and in research and cultural institutions, and by conducting advocacy works. So thank you very much once again, Special Rapporteur, OHCR Chair, UNESCO, Scholars at Risk, and all the co-sponsors of this event. And thank you again. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Well, now it's working. So thank you very much. And now we move. And I would like to give the floor to Ms. Farida Shaheed, the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education, who will present her report and discuss the importance of addressing academic freedoms from a right to education perspective. So, Ms. Shaheed, you have the floor. I think it's...
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is always the period after lunch where everyone goes to sleep, so let's hope I can make you stay awake. Thank you for being here, and thanks to all the sponsors for this opportunity. I have, of course, presented my report to the Human Rights Council yesterday and the day before. I cannot possibly go through all the report again, but let me highlight some things which I think are absolutely critical. Let me start by asking and reminding ourselves of what education should be under international human rights law, because I think academic freedom is absolutely closely attached to that. So it says, this is the International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, it must be directed to the full development of the human personality and human dignity. It should strengthen respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, enable everyone, all persons, to participate effectively in a free state, and promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship. So at the end of the day, what education is supposed to do is to empower people, both individually and at the collective level, to continue to progress. And education, especially, but not only at higher levels, is really to be seen as a co-creative process where there's multiple directional learning of the learners as well as the educators. We are always in a state of learning. And I think I will repeat that what education is learning. It's learning to learn in a continuous process. It is to do, to be, and to live together. So coming back to the live together and understanding, tolerance, friendship, etc. And the phrase that I love and continue to is the freedom indispensable that is needed for scientific progress and creative artistic work. So I think these are what, to me, is the core of education, and therefore why the right to academic freedom is absolutely intrinsic to the right to education. Yeah. So it is about the creation of knowledge and critical thinking. So what I have been shocked by, as you have said, is not just the number of people, the fact that it's decreasing, but also the modalities that are used to restrict academic freedom. And so these can be very overt and violent, and they're evident, but there are also many subtle ways of doing this through funding, through management techniques, the new management ways, through surveillance of students and staff and researchers and what they're doing. And the actors is a huge plethora of people who are involved in this. So we think of governments or government authorities as being the persons who restrict. But if you look, and what the submissions have shown to me, is that you also have political and religious actors and parties. You have armed and terrorist groups who are trying to curtail academic freedom. We've heard of narco traffickers. We've heard of corporate entities. We've heard of philanthropists. And I'll come back to your point on funding, because I think that's one of the important things. But also, strangely enough, many of the school educational institutions themselves are restricting academic freedom in those institutions. We have the work of school boards, staff, students, and parents associations, often who are trying to restrict that academic freedom in different settings. And I think we've already heard, if we curtail academic freedom, this world will be left much poorer in terms of our humanity and creativity. And as it's been said, we will seriously be damaging both learning and democratic processes, as well as our capacity to respond to all the various crises we are facing today, be it climate change, as you mentioned, or other things. We really need that academic freedom to be there. And I think the second, well, I don't know which point this is, but anyway. So one of the points is that all educational levels are interrelated and interlinked. So when I hear academic freedom, okay, we're talking about higher education or we're talking about universities. No, unless we instill and ensure academic freedom right from the first level of education, is not going to happen. You can't suddenly in 7th grade say, okay, now we bring this in and forget what you've said, because the mindset of learning has already been established. And I think one of the primary tasks of teachers is to facilitate the students they're engaged with to develop their own academic skills, which means that they must know how to and be encouraged to mediate difficult conversations. So everyone is not the same. Everyone doesn't have the same opinion. We all have diversity. But diversity is what makes humanity. So we need to give space to the diverse voices, and our teachers must know how to mediate that, because I think often we don't. And we have seen time and again the silencing. So teachers increasingly talk about the chilling effect. We don't dare. We don't know if we can. This is a subject which we mustn't, etc. I think that is extremely damaging. I think also the point is that it's not just inside classrooms and campuses. There is not just a right of academics, researchers, students, teachers to engage with what's called extramural environments, which means outside campuses and their educational institutions. They also have a social responsibility to do so. If we have new ideas, we need these to be shared with the public. We need the public's feedback on whether this is something that is agreeable and we can go forward on it or not. We need people's feedback as part of the democratic process. And this could be through academic and non-academic publications, through public testimonies, print and online media, radio, television, exhibitions, demonstrations, and other events. So there's a whole plethora. And in each of these, I have received communications of how these rights are being violated, and it is extremely worrying. And I have just met with some wonderful young people over this last week and this week, and I think we have to listen to the youth. And what I heard is that even in European countries where we consider this is, you know, an open environment which encourages academic freedom, they said we don't have space to question, we don't have space to debate, we are expected to regurgitate whatever the professor thinks is right. So even here you have a closing in of academic freedom, which I think is particularly problematic. And I think one of the things we heard about funds is critical. Yes. So what we're saying is it's very tempting because you don't have the funds, resources necessary. So we're getting people, universities, colleges will be encouraging donors to come in or philanthropists to come in. But what is critical here is not whether they do or not, it is the conditions under which those agreements are made. And so whether it's a private enterprise, corporate sector, or it is in fact a philanthropist, I think what you have, and that I have given in my report, is you must pay attention to the no influence clauses, which must be systematically introduced so that they cannot then influence academic freedom. And then there's a question of neutrality. So you will have seen in my report, I've said maybe we need to go back to what is this concept of neutrality? My experience in First Sociology 101 is there's no such thing as neutrality. The only thing is subjectivity, and the way to be neutral is to express what your subjectivity is. So when we have specified textbooks, we have specified curriculum, we have specified things, this is all you can do, then we are undermining academic freedom, and I think this is extremely important. So I think to end, one or two things only, what can be done? So at the interactive dialogue, this was a question of many states. And I think one of the great things is the principles for implementing academic rights, which have been a working group of UN and experts and academics, is really good. And you have copies available in all languages here in case you want to pick it up. We would call on all states to also endorse this and other stakeholders to also take this forward. I think another concrete thing that we would request is that in the next resolution on the education, the right to education mandate, that academic freedom is mentioned. I think academic freedom needs to be mentioned in the language in the resolutions so we can move forward. And when we say access to academic freedom, it also means access to the conditions necessary, as we heard. What are the conditions when you have cooperation with other people? What are the resources? Do we have access to the information? Because at the end of the day, if you are to produce knowledge, you need access to the existing knowledge. You need to debate that, discuss that, create your own knowledge, and then open it up for further criticism to take forward. At least that's what the scientists keep telling me. So I know we're going to talk about the principles for implementing the academic freedoms, and I look forward to everyone's comments and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can continue with our discussions, and well, we have already noted after all these three interventions that despite their importance, the academic freedoms are increasingly under threat, but there are some solutions and ways forward already presented. So I would now like to give the floor to Mr. David Robinson, who is online.
Yes, I'm here. Hopefully folks can hear me okay.
Is it? Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Well, thank
I'm
you.
always thrilled when the technology works. So,
Well,
and
I'm
on
more
time.
thrilled than you
So,
that it works, yeah.
Mr. Robinson is a senior consultant to the Secretary General of Education International, and he will share with us his views about importance of academic freedoms for teachers and the freedom to teach. He's also representing teachers' unions. So, Mr. Robinson, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to the sponsors. And
You're
to the Special
muted.
Rapporteur.
No, it's the, it's a,
It's
sorry.
okay? Okay. I'm more thrilled when the technology works than even you are, but I would say thank you again, Chair, and thank you to the sponsors, and especially to the Special Rapporteur for this excellent report. I wanted to just highlight a couple of things in the report, and speaking from the perspective of teachers at all levels, even though I come from the higher education sector. I think the one key point in the report is the recognition that academic freedom spans all levels of education, although maybe in different ways, but it's a fundamental principle at all levels of education. And I think the report is very helpful in reiterating what academic freedom is and helping us to understand in an international framework what common understandings of academic freedom are. And the report highlights what I call the four legs of academic freedom. If you imagine academic freedom as a chair, there are four legs that hold it up, and each one is vitally important. You take one away and the whole chair becomes unstable. But academic freedom is defined as freedom in teaching and classroom discussion, the freedom to engage in research or scholarship and to disseminate the results of that research and scholarship, intramural academic freedom, which is really the freedom to contribute to, develop, and criticize educational policies. And that's a fundamental pillar of quality education. And finally, extramural academic freedom, or the freedom of teachers to exercise their civil liberties without institutional or government censorship. And I want to emphasize, and the report does this, I think, very well, is that academic freedom shouldn't be seen as a perk or a special privilege or a reward, but rather it's the necessary condition for teachers to be able to do their job in providing high quality education. So it's not something peripheral to what we do, it's actually central to what we do as teachers. In academic freedom in teaching, which I wanted to focus on just a little bit, spans to different degrees all levels of education. It includes the rights of teachers to employ their professional expertise in adopting or adapting pedagogical materials and methods consistent with professional and other subject matter standards. It also includes their freedom to assess student performance based on objective criteria. Academic freedom in teaching is necessary to ensure that learning, discussion, and other activities cannot be constrained by pressures from outside authorities or various pressure groups. And I wanted to turn to two threats that the report highlights that I wanted to underline as important for us. The Special Rapporteur already mentioned the issue of neutrality, or sometimes it's framed as balance in the classroom. Obviously, classrooms should not be indoctrination centers. But we also have to be wary that calls for neutrality that are loosely defined sometimes can in themselves lead to the imposition of a prescribed doctrine on teachers. And we've seen around the world some attempts to impose neutrality or balance by preventing classroom discussion of so-called divisive concepts in schools, things like gender studies, critical race theory, anti-colonial studies. And this is, I think, a very troubling trend where we now have various authorities and outside pressure groups trying to dictate what classroom discussion should be, and putting guardrails or prohibitions around certain kinds of subjects. Because teachers have to be free to convey to students the state of knowledge in the relevant field in all its ugliness and in all its contestation. There may well be ideas or theoretical approaches to a subject that can't responsibly be left out from discussion. I don't know how you could have a discussion about, I think Special Rapporteur mentioned sociology, how you could have a discussion about sociological approaches these days without talking about gender studies or a gender approach or a feminist approach. At the same time, teachers should be free not to present ideas that do not have standing in a discipline, not to teach that the earth is flat, for instance, not to teach ideas that are contrary to internationally recognized human rights, not to teach hate in the classroom. And so this is why academic freedom is also important. And finally, I just wanted to highlight one other element of the report that we shouldn't lose sight of, and that is, what are the protections for academic freedom? The report talks about constitutional protections, legislative protections, but there's also an employment angle here too. That traditionally academic freedom was protected, particularly in higher education, with job security or tenure or its equivalent. But what we've seen around the world is an increasing casualization of the teaching profession. In the United States, 70% of people who teach in universities or colleges are now off the tenure track, that are in precarious contracts. In Latin America, it's close to 100% in some institutions. In Africa, similarly, close to 100%. And when you have teachers who are precariously employed, you don't need to fire them because they raise difficult questions or challenge powerful interests. You simply don't have to renew their contracts. And so I think the foundational protection for academic freedom in its employment sense is also one that we should be concerned about, and that governments and authorities should be looking to address. But let me just end by, again, thanking the Special Rapporteur for this report. I hope that we have a clear action plan coming out of this. Academic freedom, as I said, and as the report says, is not a benefit or a special appendage to the teaching profession. It's absolutely central to it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution. It's really very interesting to hear another opinion from another perspective, and I certainly do hope that you will stay with us until the end of the meeting and participate in the discussion. So now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Hector Ulloa from the Global Students Forum. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Let me start by saying that it has been very exciting to follow these past days the presentation of the Special Rapporteur's report on academic freedom in the Human Rights Council session. And I think the writing of the principles for implementing the right to academic freedom, the report by the Special Rapporteur, and its presentation really shows us now that we are past that stage of abstract discussions of the doctrine of what is academic freedom. And instead, we have entered a new phase where states, institutions, and individuals cannot longer argue that they don't have the required knowledge to kind of seriously commit to strengthening and protecting academic freedom. And it is under this new understanding that of what is required to protect academic freedom that I want to highlight today 2 points. The first one is regarding challenges for students. Because from the documents I mentioned before, I think it's very important to highlight and mention that very clearly it shouldn't be controversial to say that all students have the right to academic freedom. And the report's assertion of academic freedom as a human right, not a professional freedom, not something that is limited to educational personnel, further strengthens this notion. So the challenge we have before us now is to aid in that understanding that academic freedom of students applies at all levels. So it's not only at higher education, as it has usually been perceived. And this is so because all educational levels, if we look at education as the enterprise of education, it all is connected. So each level, as it was also already mentioned right now, influences the quality of the next level, and they reinforce themselves through quality teacher training, fostering of critical thinking, or having high quality academic content. So my first call today is that one, to recognize students' rights to academic freedom at all levels. But what if we look at the other level where it has usually been recognized? What about students in higher education? And in this sphere, we believe that there is an immediate need to protect students' right to express themselves without fear of reprisal. We see worldwide that students continue to be the targets of violence through arrests, extrajudicial killings, expulsions, or militarization of campus. And all of this usually come as a direct consequence of exercising their academic freedom. So Scholars at Risk's Free to Think report and the Norwegian Students and Academics Assistance Fund Activism Under Attack reports are just some examples where you can find concrete cases of these dangerous developments globally. So student activism, mobilization, unionization, and general participation in the public debate by students should be seen as a milestone of academic excellence. But unfortunately, what we see today in many places is that it is perceived as a disruption of academic activities. And even more worrying, in many places, we see that some actors have moved to preventively limiting students' academic freedom through surveillance and intimidation. And we have seen many examples of this in the past months whenever students have tried to mobilize against, for example, Israel's war in Gaza. And it is very important for us in the Global Student Forum to highlight these kind of situations where students are being surveilled and sanctioned in many countries just for exercising their academic freedom to denounce the ongoing actions against the Palestinian people. And this takes me to the second point, which is about self-censorship among students and researchers. Because a free and independent academia is super valuable for our modern societies, because it allows us to have critical voices that question established truths and also gives us better informed public debates. However, attacks on academic freedom really undermine this in subtle, silent forms, which are hard to measure or track. And self-censorship is the best example of these silent consequences, if we would call them like that. Academic work is always supposed to be held accountable by the public. So public scrutiny is at the core of any quality academic endeavor. So we cannot say, or there cannot really be an academia in an environment of self-censorship. And attacks against tax research, for example, from lobby groups financed by wealthy individuals, or attacks against gender studies from religious groups are just some example of academic areas that have recently been also under serious pressure. And attacks against these individuals working in these topics have a broader goal that sometimes goes unperceived. And that is the goal of preventing new people from pursuing research or debate in such topics, because then they will be afraid of the consequences they would face. So these attacks really at the core seek to create or to preserve a status quo through self-censorship. And human rights mechanisms need to be remodeled then to capture violations of academic freedom as autonomous violations, because only then will the international community and civil society be able to better track these silent consequences, such as self-censorship. And important to this is that attacks on academic freedom usually precede more violent attacks against democratic institutions or other human rights. That is why tracking academic freedom can really provide us with a solid system of early warning mechanisms. So I'll just finish by really commending the call made by the Special Rapporteur to the Human Rights Council to fully consider the principles for implementing the right to academic freedom, as well as the call to member states and stakeholders to implement these principles. As explained in the Special Rapporteur's report, policies and guidelines on academic freedom are usually not legally binding. But the actions from these past days really bring us closer to these principles being an authoritative guidance in the topic. but there is still much work to be done. So to all those states and stakeholders that have decided to take on this challenge, student organizations worldwide are ready to support these efforts. So I would encourage you not to hesitate to collaborate with them. And I assure you that you'll be surprised about how much can be achieved through these partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks of the main role and the students play in this discussion, and also for highlighting how violations of academic freedoms can be multifaceted, as we know. So, and now we move to Jessie Levine, the Senior Advocacy Officer in Scholars at Risk organization. Jessie, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I'm delighted to speak with you today about the principles of implementation of the right to academic freedom. I want to first, of course, express deep gratitude to the Special Rapporteur for her excellent and timely report, and to UNESCO and the missions of Portugal, the European Union, Finland, Ireland, France, Luxembourg, and the Republic of Korea for their partnership in this important work. I'd like to begin by re-emphasizing what I think was one of the central points of the SR's report, that academic freedom is as important to a democratic society as a free press or an independent judiciary. It's intuitive, isn't it? Universities and other academic institutions are the seats of scientific progress, models of social and political cooperation, and the training grounds for nearly every institution needed for a functioning democracy. So, of course, the set of rights that allows universities to function is indispensable. But that raises an additional question. If the importance of academic freedom is self-evident, why have we as a human rights community failed for so long to provide practical protections for it and to promote it to the same degree as we have other crucial rights? I would suggest that that question is at least partially answered by the structure and the content of the report itself. Quite simply, academic freedom is complicated. Legally, it's grounded in not one, but in three separate sets of human rights standards: the right to education, the right to the benefits of science, and freedom of opinion and expression. It's typically held and exercised by a complicated network of stakeholders, including scholars, administrators, teachers, and students, among others. And the obligation to protect academic freedom falls not just to states, but to institutional actors, members of the academic community, and the wider society. In crucial respects, a lot of the important academic freedom work that has been done within the UN, as well as in regional bodies over the past 4 years, has been devoted to the necessary work of addressing this complexity. That work begins with the 2020 report on academic freedom by David Kaye, the former Special Rapporteur on freedom of opinion and expression, which Special Rapporteur Shaheed refers to in her report. It continues with regional statements, especially within the EU and the Americas, and it culminates really with SR Shaheed's report. Together, these documents lay out in unprecedented detail exactly what academic freedom is, how and by whom it's exercised, and who is obligated to protect it. But the SR's report does a lot more than that. It goes beyond doctrine and recognizes the need for a practical, on-the-ground set of tools for implementing the right to academic freedom. And I'm proud that we were able to contribute to this aspect of the report, and I'm excited about the action that's going to follow from it. Beginning in 2021, Scholars at Risk and a group of our partners established an international working group on academic freedom with the intention of producing authoritative, practical guidance for real-world monitoring, protection, and promotion of academic freedom. We were careful to recruit partners not only from across global regions, but also from every relevant stakeholder group, including human rights scholars and advocates, experts on higher as well as primary and secondary education, UN officers and staff, student representatives, and academic union leadership. Over the course of about a year, the working group developed the principles for implementing the right to academic freedom. That was subject to a 10-month public comment period, and finally, the principles were released this past March. The document lays out in detail 9 essential principles which the working group believes would effectively guarantee the protection, promotion, and enjoyment of the right to academic freedom once they're fully implemented. Because of time limitations, I will describe the principles in the broadest possible stroke, but I encourage you to follow along if you have the principles in front of you. Principle 1 details the nature of the right itself. Principle 2 describes academic freedom's protections under international human rights law. Principle 3 centers institutional autonomy as an indispensable aspect of academic freedom. Principle 4 addresses the relationship of members of the education community with the wider society, including both the right to academic expression outside traditional educational spaces, also known as extramural speech, as well as social responsibility. Principle 5 makes clear that academic freedom requires access to information. Principle 6 addresses the freedoms of movement and association that are necessary components of academic freedom. Principle 7 acknowledges that academic freedom is essential to all levels of education, as has been discussed. Principle 8 notes that students have the right to academic freedom. And finally, Principle 9 makes clear that respect for, protection of, and promotion of academic freedom is a shared responsibility. Two appendices then provide the practical sets of tools for realizing each of the principles. The first appendix provides a detailed set of questions for assessing the state of academic freedom in a particular national or institutional setting. And these will be used by UN and other officials in the course of country visits, by foreign offices as they conduct desk research and produce country reports, and by experts assessing regional, national, and local conditions. Appendix 2 lays out practical guidance that states, educational systems, ministries, institutions, staff, and student unions can undertake to improve implementation of the right to academic freedom in practice. The questions in Appendix 1 are probing and detailed, and they'll give users the ability to ask specific hard questions about the countries or institutions they're evaluating. And the recommendations in Appendix 2 will empower stakeholders at every level by giving them a framework for a freer educational space and the tools for making specific demands of their institutional, local, and national leaders. In drafting the principles, we were very deliberate about providing guidance to all stakeholder groups, because producing the kind of protections that higher education institutions need and that democracy demands will take buy-in from everyone: UN officials, states, students, professors, and teachers, and others. But it begins at this level. During yesterday's interactive dialogue, Portugal took up the Special Rapporteur's recommendation and called upon all states to take effective measures to implement the principles for implementing the right to academic freedom. And I want to publicly thank Portugal for doing that, and of course the SR for making the point initially. We stand ready to partner with you all in that process. By recognizing the principles and joining us in advancing them, both within this space and in your home countries, in your foreign offices, with national schools and universities, and with the public, you'll be sending a powerful signal that about your state's commitment to academic freedom and its crucial role in a democracy. We hope to continue this conversation with a great many of you as we move into the implementation phase of this important work, and we thank you for your partnership.
Thank you very much, and we are certainly going to continue to work together on this, and thanks for reminding us of the principles that are there. So I think you have maybe noticed there was a slight change in the program, so now, last but not the least, UNESCO. This is Anna Louisa Thompson, the UNESCO representative in Geneva. You have the floor.
Good afternoon. Yes, there was a change of plan. Normally, my colleague, JC Chang, would be here, but he had a bit of a logistics mishap. So he'll be joining us a little bit later. I was hoping that he would be here with us by the end of the hour, but so here I am, as mentioned. My name is Ana Luisa Thompson Flores. I am the director of the UNESCO Liaison Office in Geneva. So taking from some of the notes of JC, first and foremost, I want, on behalf of UNESCO, to thank you all for taking your lunchtime to be here for this very important subject. And also, I take the opportunity, since I'm the last speaker, to thank all the panelists for their very important input, and of course, the Special Rapporteur for the reason we're here, which is her report. Now, as was mentioned at the very beginning of our meeting by two of our sponsors, this is a pivotal side event because it gives us the opportunity to bring to your attention the points that were raised by the Special Rapporteur, but also to initiate a dialogue with the different interested parties in this discussion. So today, we gathered actually to amplify the protection and promotion of the right to academic freedom, a cornerstone of the right to education, freedom of expression, as was mentioned, social justice, and global peace. The UN Special Rapporteur's report highlights academic freedom as a critical global imperative, intersecting human rights, scientific progress, and democratic resilience. In today's world, where the flow of information and ideas is both a currency and a catalyst, ensuring academic freedom for both educators and learners, as was mentioned before, at all levels is fundamental. The principles, just recently described, attached to the Special Rapporteur's report articulate not just the freedoms, but also the responsibilities that come with academic inquiry and expression. UNESCO has a unique mandate to protect and promote academic freedom. This mission aligns with our broader commitment to fostering peace. Our work, guided by normative instruments, such as the recommendation concerning the status of higher education teaching personnel in 1997, is dedicated to safeguarding the spaces where scholars operate, ensuring they can pursue knowledge without fear of repression and retaliation. A recently, last year, revised recommendation on education for peace, human rights, and sustainable development further emphasizes freedom of expression and opinion, academic and scientific freedom, professional responsibility, and institutional autonomy as central to teaching and learning. Despite our respective efforts, academic freedom faces increasing threats. This is why, at UNESCO, we actively collaborate with member states and other stakeholders to strengthen the frameworks. The Higher Education Roadmap, presented at the 2022 UNESCO World Higher Education Conference, is an important tool, as it emphasizes academic freedom through institutional autonomy and ethical values in higher education institution programs, advocating for leadership integrity. This extends also to artificial intelligence systems, promoting social responsibility and environmental sustainability. Our initiative on evolving right to education, which seeks to reinforce education-related human rights instruments to better address contemporary challenges and anticipate future needs, aims to also enhance understanding, reinforce legal protections, and foster environments where educational and scientific inquiries flourish. Looking forward, the joint statement issued during the 52nd session of the Human Rights Council, backed by 72 countries, signifies a robust commitment to enhancing global cooperation on academic freedom. Today's event marks a collective effort to advance academic freedom as a fundamental human right. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now I have a pleasure to open the floor for your comments, questions, observations. Yes, please.
Hüseyin Demir, I am a president of Human Rights Defenders Organization from Berlin. I am originally from Turkey and exile academician. So it's very important to hear these principles laid out in the report. But Madam Reporter, can you recommend us anything that we can find a remedy for our problems? Like, because I am not the only one. More than 6,000 academicians has been discharged, alleged with the association, terrorist organization, etc. And we've been left to civil death. I was the lucky one who could get out of Turkey and come to Germany. But my colleagues, two of them have died in prison. So that's what I was going to ask. Thank you.
Sudan, you have the floor. South Sudan. Apologies, it's my side, South Sudan.
but I have some, fearings coming from a diverse, ethnic country like South Sudan. My fearing is, would the academic freedom be misused? What should be the limit for because sometimes in countries with diverse ethnicity, you have the hate speech, which is actually going on, and it prevails, in such countries. So what should be actually the limit? Because I'm afraid that, academic freedom may be misused by the teachers or the professors or even by the students themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there are no other, yes, yes, please go ahead.
Hello, and thank you for organizing this side event. My question is, how can we solve the problem of implementing these principles due to the non-legally binding of these principles? Actually, it is not binding, and it might be a problem for implementation of these principles. And the second question is,
Sorry, can you please introduce yourself? Because I can't see from here if you have, yeah. Can you just introduce yourself, please, and continue?
the Executive Director of the ODVV. And the second question is about the principle number 6. How can we utilize this principle due to the recent uprisings by students related to war in Gaza? Thank you.
Thank you. I would not like to miss anyone again, so, but I don't see any other. So before we conclude, I would like to give the floor again to Special Rapporteur for concluding remarks and responding to the issues raised. Thank you.
Thank you. The first thing about human rights, any kind of human rights, is get people to understand there's a violation. Then to get the language that, yes, we accept that there is a human right here. And then the slow process starts of it becoming something that can be justiciable and eventually that can be enjoyed. So there are many steps. And I'm really sorry about the situation in your country and your colleagues. It's not an easy, I can't give you the solution now, but what we are saying, this is why it's so important, because so many of the communications I've received, and it's from the world over, where people have been brutalized, they've been harassed, they've been imprisoned, and some have lost their lives in the process of expressing, of doing research, of presenting the research results, of speaking about a difference of opinion. And therefore, that's the reason that I wrote the report. But I'm sorry, it's a slow process and we all have to pull together. I think one of the first things that needs to happen, however, is, for instance, the good practices that we heard Portugal has it in their constitution. And I think you have to have constitutional protection of this right. And then you have to have sub-constitutional laws that actually do it. And then you have to have the policies and processes in each institutions, what will happen. So it's not going to happen overnight, but I think if we commit ourselves to working together to take it forward, it would help. And for the states, I just want to say, one, I should really thank all the experts of the working group who put together the principles, but also all of those who I have engaged with in the writing of the report and everyone's submission. There were some amazing, the detailed submissions that we received from everywhere, and I really appreciate it. Without them, of course, we would not have been able to put this together. I do want to also say that states who are interested, and many states have sponsored the resolution last year, should really look, I think the expertise that you have amongst the people who were in the working group for the principles, but also those who have engaged with the mandate over the last year, are people who can actually provide technical assistance, and the principals, who are there, the appendices actually have practical steps also. So I think that's something I wanted to underline. I do want to say that the surveillance is not restricted to Gaza or the protests there. Should we not be mistaken? The students have complained, the teachers have complained about increasing surveillance of everything that they're doing in the classroom, online, outside of classrooms, on campuses, nothing to do with what's happening in Palestine at the moment. So this is something which is a general problem which needs to be looked in. The increasing presence of police in many campuses, all of that is silencing, all of that is undermining academic freedom. On that, I also want to say that there is the banning of books. So not just the subjects that you can't talk about, which David spoke about, David Robinson mentioned, but the banning of books in school libraries, but also in the general public libraries. And they are also banned in jails, for instance. So those books with images which would help literacy are being banned in some places. And the crazy thing I heard was that someone authority came and picked up literally 100 books from a library and put them into jail. So it's not the person, you understand, it's the books that were placed into jail. So we're having some very interesting things happening in terms of suppressing discussion and debate. And I think also in terms of research, I think one of the critical things is that the research funding, that's why I was emphasizing the conditions in which you accept funding is crucial, because sometimes research, especially in higher education, scientific research, is being controlled by those who are providing money to public universities very often due to patents. So some research findings they don't want the results of, some they do want the results of, some they want to delay the publication. All of that has direct implications for academic freedom. I did request, misused. I think everywhere, yes, you have to have the understanding, your teachers, everybody has to have that. But we can't be so afraid of this that we clamp down completely and say there can be no discussion. So I think we need to find the modalities, but always hate speech is disallowed. It's not something, human rights, as you heard this, some of the panelists also, hate speech is incitement to violence. No, you can't have this, but the teachers and students, everyone, you have to have a discussion on what this means and how to handle it. Teachers often themselves don't know how to handle it. So I think it's really promoting a narrative of a plurality of voices, of accepting that we don't always agree with each other, but that's fine to disagree, but to have that disagreement in non-violent ways rather than violent ways. So I think the principles on Gaza, we can have, the next discussion is on that, so we can go there. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you. In the 30 seconds that is left, I would also use to thank everyone for their participation, for your insightful comments, and voila, thank you for your dedication, for engagement, and see you at the next event on the right to education. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.